Good morning. Thank you for attending. Step 4, the searching and fearless moral infantry of ourselves. It does say ourselves, not others. The principles in integrity. Just going to do a little bit of reading from a big book about recommended reading. Step 4, and then I'll get on with sharing my experience.
So next we launched out on a course of vigorous action, the first step of which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us had never attempted. Through our decision, though our decision was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless it at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and to be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us. Our liquor was but a symptom. We had to get down to causes and conditions. Therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. Resentment is the #1 offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From it stems all forms of spiritual disease, for we have been not only mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. We listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. We asked ourselves why we were angry. In most cases, we found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened. So we were sore, we were burned up. Next to fear. So notice the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties with Miss Brown and Mrs. Jones, the employer and the wife. The short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. It was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. But did we not, ourselves, set the ball rolling? Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble. We reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper, even though we had no resentments in connection with them. Now about sex. We reviewed our own conduct over the years past. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? Whom had we hurt? Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Where were we at fault? What should we have done instead? We got it all down on paper and looked at it. In this way, we tried to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. We subject each relation to the test. Was it selfish or not? We asked God to mold our ideal and help us live up to them. We remembered always that our sex power were God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised and loathed.
Thank you. So, moral and fearless infantry. The very word fearless is interesting. You can even bring up fear, this infantry. There's 3 parts to the step 4 infantry. The first part is fear. Second part is fear. The first part is resentment or anger. And the third part is sexual behaviours, both past, present, and in the future. What I mean by the future is our fantasies. So if we start with resentment and resentment. You can call it out, little bits and pieces that we've been angry along the way. As suggested, it's the killer, you know. We seem to. My first infantry resentment went back to when I was about 3 or 4. It was to do with the present dad given me and another boy, and I was resentful he got the better toy. So that's where it kind of started. The recommended way of doing this is do your resentments first, then your fears, and then your sexual infantry. It's good to have another piece of paper because sometimes stuff comes up that won't fit into one of those three categories. But if you start with your resentment, it's a 5-column resentment infantry. The person, institution, principle, or whatever really, that has made you angry, resentful. So if we stop, there's five columns in resentment infantry. The first is person, place, or institution that we're resentful with. The second column is about cause. So we've identified the person exactly who's made us angry, and then we look at the second column is what caused this anger. The third column, possibly the most important, we look at how it affected us. How did it affect our personal relationships, our ambitions? Where might it brought up fear? There's one more. Let me just no. There's pocketbook and sexual relations. And then there's another very interesting part at the end is we use the example women are or should be. It can be parents are or should be. It can be wives are or should be. What's interesting about this particular part is and what can help you work through is you start to look at your beliefs. So go back to the resentment, the cause, then the column, the third column, which is really the important part because you're working here towards how it affected you. That's what you're after. This is not someone else's, although you may use the resentments, etc., to find out what's going on. You're really after how it affects you, not how it affects them. They just play party in this. You know, they often say in spiritual places and communities that our biggest helpers, teachers, are the people that challenge us, possibly make us angry. We've all got examples where people would come along and step down our toes. But a way of looking at it, and this is what we're trying for here, is to see how their actions made us behave in certain ways, get angry. So it's all about third column. The other two suggest to bring up the resentment and help you look at why you're resentful and angry and what the third column is where you start to look at how it affects you. That's what we're after. It's a personal moral infantry. And we're only looking here for the facts as we may see them. Nothing else. So go to the fourth column. It's really, it could be said as what could we do instead? And then we finish off with the fifth one, which it may or may not come up where, you know, the person for the amends list, the institution for the amends list. Don't concern yourself too much if you're not getting up in that column, because that's really step 8, made a list. But the names, it will become apparent, or possibly become apparent, places we need to make, or person that we need to make amends. Just put them in there. There is a school of thought that says once we do our step 4, we burn it. Well, that's okay. I totally understand and see why it might be useful. Or in a river, or the bin, with the less sophisticated amongst us. Not so wise for now, because we've got information there that we'll need to refer back to. So the fourth column, back to the fourth column, is we see how it affects our defects. What's pushing our buttons here? That is also exceedingly useful for when we come to our sixth step, because you need to find out the defects before you can really start with God, high power, to put them right. So that's the fourth column, and you see where these defects are more prominent. In my experience of working with people, usually a lot of self-esteem stuff comes up here. More than likely, highly likely, fear. So we write all the defects, and at a later stage, June, our fifth step and our sixth step, we get to work out which ones are affecting us most. So I hope that's clear. Then we go into the second infantry, the fear infantry, which is a 4-column infantry. And we put the fear in the first column. In the second column, we put, why do we have this fear? We may not know, but we try and work out where it came from. This is a place I've found that a lot of childhood stuff comes up here, you know. Why would we have a fear of religious institution? I myself had to do an awful lot of work on this. I was brought up around a lot of abusive people within religious communities. I was beaten up by a Catholic priest, and there was a sex abuse in that. You know, I didn't understand it then, but through my journey of recovery, I realised how abusive it was. So I had a fear of religious organisations, which kept me from getting on with my life, really, because I'd always considered, or I always understood that I was, you know, really spiritual little bit, really, rattling around in these communities, which didn't work out so well. But I never really had a problem with the God concept. In fact, it favoured me. Even many years ago, before I entered recovery, someone asked me to sponsor their child to communion. And I said, well, why did you choose me? And he said, because you're the only person I ever met who spoke about God. Kind of interesting. So we list all our fears down. And in the second column, why do you have this fear? the third column is how would the creator, higher power, self-reliance. Where did self-reliance fail? In other words, self, which is how the process works. The 12-step process was to try and diminish the ego and the self, because this is really what causes the problem. So where did self-reliance fail? Where did we fail? And then the fourth column is about how to create higher power, higher self. Please feel free to have your own creative input into this. I totally encourage that. I think some of the way the 12-step process has been taught, rolled out, etc., doesn't give us much room for our own input. Now, the other thing worth mentioning is we're in there with high power now, as shaky as that may be. It's a tough piece of work. So how would it be if we didn't have this fear? Someone came to me this morning when we were reviewing. Someone suggested to me a long time ago to put fear through the resentment inventory. It brought up a lot of interesting stuff. Because just like Big Book said, and I got that relatively earlier on, fear had completely controlled my life, completely. Now, I wouldn't have had that until, I saw it. I was scared of everything. So an example of how I was going to use the word creator there, how would they have to speak? I would suggest the answer here for a lot of it is happy, joyous and free. So as you can see, we're starting to move into how it can be if we didn't have these fears. It's powerful. It's powerful work. So having completed that, I would also suggest here that you have all these entries laid out in front of you, because you might be doing a resentment inventory and suddenly a big old fear pops in. Just write it down. Don't run with it unless you feel you need to. Just pop it down. And again, have that fourth piece of paper there for something weird that might jump out. One of the suggestions that was given to me when I first started taking infantry is that it's like going into the swamp, and it's kind of good to have a rope to pull yourself back out, i.e. a sponsor, a close-mouthed friend. It can be a spiritual person. Because it's only the truth, only the facts. But they can knock us about. And it could be a counsellor. All this is, these days, they say one of the few things that have changed since the early days, the sponsorship thing has become more prevalent. So, we pick a sponsor, sponsors. It's best if one person knows this is fifth step stuff, knows a whole story. But people can spread it about. I'll just tell I think it's humorous. Because of mine, I come from a large Irish family. At the time, there was only 2 of us from the recovery, well over hundreds 100 people. And his cousin lived in London, in Streatham, and he'd left his step 4, a fully completed step 4, of which there was 174 resentments. He left it on a bus, and he had to go to Streatham bus garage to retrieve it. Imagine that. It wouldn't bother me now, but imagine you've got all your personal stuff down and you leave it on a bus and you have to go to the garage to pick it up. Okay. Challenging times. So then we go to the sectional infantry. Now, most of us haven't negotiated that arena very, very well. And there's 11 columns. I'm not going to break them all down. But it's basically looking where we might harm, hurt, certainly others, and more than likely ourselves. I was doing things along the way that probably wouldn't be considered that healthy. I'm very fortunate here, my own story. I've never had huge hang-ups in this area. That's not saying I didn't get myself into trouble, end up in the wrong beds, hurting people, acting out. I did plenty of it. And I suppose of all the infantries, this is the place that gave me the most freedom, really. To look at that, how that person had acted out. Obviously there was guilt and shame, and this is where the relief will come in this step. And I urge you to be thorough. Now, a opinion, and it's probably mine, is the most important part of this, as we set out in the last column of sectional infantry, where a future ideal vision for how we'd like to run our future sectional life. I found this so useful, and I kept the same vision for the best part of 20 years. I even turned it into an affirmation at times. And that didn't realise about 2 years ago when I met my wife. And it was to have a spiritual, wholesome, sexual relationship, loving. And even that in itself is a little scary, because like many of us, I had chaotic relationships. And it's one of the places that blew me away. What's the ideal? But almost a bit scary. What's your ideal for your future sexual relations? Now, quite obviously, I sponsored men, women, gay people. The freedom that can be had here is unbelievable. Because we are, by nature, most of us, sexual beings. And it's where I'll speak personally, it's where I've had a lot of fun. But it's also given me a lot of pain, difficulty. I've hurt people, including myself. I think it's sort of thought it's not about self. But it's not. But you have to investigate yourself and our actions. So I'd encourage you to do a sexual infantry, and that'll be everyone you have sexual relationships with, that would be your fantasies right now. It's like mental stimulation for some of us. You know, we can spend time imagining these sexual experiences that are to come. It's good to look at them. You could, you know, I'd be surprised. It's almost impossible, to imagine sexual stuff, sexual experiences, what we'd like to do, what we wouldn't like to do. And there can be a lot learned here. Not for one moment do I think there's anything, unless we're forcing something or someone to do something that unwilling. It's not, it's not, most of it's not bad. Most of our thoughts we don't act out. They can be obsessional and get us into trouble. Now, as I've suggested, I clung on to that vision that I had a long, long time ago, and it kept me out of a lot of trouble, and it gave me a lot of peace, because it helped me identify as the opportunities arose, what might work for me and what didn't work for me. And it helped me navigate that arena well. Didn't do it perfectly. Probably don't do it perfectly now. But at least I have something kind of checkbook, checklist of, what my ideal is. Often when we're discussing bits and pieces with people, I'll say, what's your ideal? What's the ideal outcome here? So, just flashing back, I've got a picture behind me that arrived of my favourite aunt. She was like a mother to me, and she used to say, sure, it'll be fine. And it will be fine. So what would that look like? Your ideal. I can pretty much, maybe I'm even bragging here. Right now, I have an ideal sexual life. And it won't be made into a feature film. It ticks a lot of the boxes, possibly in a more spiritual way of working it out, rather than some of the more chaotic stuff I involved in the past, including for a period of time very obsessive about stuff. I know no one else has ever done that. So, the fourth piece of paper for infantry, as I suggested, write down just interesting stuff. It might not be resentment, fear, or sexual thing. Sometimes it can be all three. We just scribble down what comes up. This can be a very freeing experience. For most of us, it will be the first time we've done it. And again, keep emphasizing, it's only as we see them. When we go a bit further, we will have a different perspective. I think I'm going to leave it there. Do we have any questions or observations or anything you might need a bit of clarity on? know, just like most of the people here will listen to this, you know, this is only my experience. Like, I'm only a recovering addict. I'm personally interested in the steps, as my story's been shared as we go through, and you know, I had the same difficulties many years ago that people are going through right now. You know, and pretty much, almost entirely, it's down to these three infantries. Once I started to get clarity, then I was just able to negotiate life much better. So now I'm going to, you know, open it up for you guys. I'm not nervous of any questions to do with this set or others. Just, you know, this is your space. You've given me the privilege of turning up this morning and getting interested in the work my life's like. So please feel free to do as you like. You will anyway.
Hi, James. Hi, James. Oh, it's loud. Thank you for sharing. I had a question. Just what kind of common mistakes do people make with step 4, like from your years of sponsoring people? Are there anything that commonly, like, people need guidance on that you can think of?
Well, certainly, and I've done it myself. I've got sent back home to the work. Instead of taking my own infantry, I'm taking others in the 4th step. What they did, you know, theirs, and, you know, oh, if this hadn't done this and they hadn't done this, it's your infantry. You're after the way you have behaved. And, well, I think we had an example yesterday. We're talking to some folk. The ideal is to concentrate on the mistakes we've made, not the mistakes others have made. As we suggested already this morning, others help us get to the truth. You know, the truth will set you free. We've all had examples of where, I remember my son got in a load of trouble at school, not a load of trouble, we cut down the tree. You know, we all got hauled in. And he said, what are we going to do? I said, we're going to tell the truth. That's what we're going to do. And when we got to the bottom of it, he was very angry with the school. And in my opinion, rightly so. But we just told the truth. There was 4 parents there. And I think, you know, all their fears, all their resentments, everything's flying all over the place. We just told the truth, you know. And I remember walking out and we looked at one another and said, well, we negotiated that up. Just told the truth. So he was angry with the school, you know. At the time they had all their opinions and, you know, they called in the police and it just worked out sweet, you know. So you're after the truth. So in answer to your question, that's what you're always after. And that's when you're guiding someone or doing your own infantry. That's the bottom line. You're after the truth. So the common mistake is we don't seek the truth. We avoid it by all kinds of bits and pieces. Now, the other common mistake is they don't do a step 4. Or they don't do the work properly. Because if you're in this game for the long haul, going to do this regularly. And it's much easier if you know your truth when you're going to resolve situations. It may be not the truth, but it's your version of. And another statement that can get made is you don't give yourself enough room. Like how I did my first big one is I was smoking at the time, so I'd go out and I'd get 20 fags, and I'd get constant supply of tea and to sit at the table and get on with it. Because it's there anyway. Does that cover it? Or
Yeah,
any more?
it does. Thank you. That's very helpful. And how long does it normally take?
Oh, in the early years, my first step forward took me about a week. And I did about 2 hours every night. I would recommend, I don't know if any of you guys have used drugs, stored drugs, but it's like a dealer's house or a pub. You go in and you get what you want and you get out. So I think it's brought up another thing here. Don't spend forever doing this because you're living the step you're working. So if you're working a step 4, you can get angry, you can get very fearful. The other column, the sexual energy, can be flying about, visiting past experiences. Get in and get out. So again, one of the steps, they take too long. The last step 4 I did, which was a little while ago now, maybe 5 years. That's not saying I don't do infantry. I had 2 resentments, no fears, and 1 piece of sexual stuff floating about. No big deals, I assure you. No one was going to make a movie about what was going on. Now, as I said before, this cousin's dead, by the way. He died sober. One of the 174 resentments. Now, the other thing that you're really after is your patterns. Now, I had a pattern of not thanking a lot of people that helped me along the way. And I found I had resentments with them, which was absolutely nothing to do with them. I'd never gone back and say, thank you. So, in answer to the question, you can spend forever in there, and people get jammed up. It's not uncommon for people to get jammed up in the 4th step because fear is doing the 5th step. You're not in the 5th step. Any more on that, Jessie? Is that helpful?
No, yeah, thank you. That was good. I have another question. That's okay. What's the difference between the 4th step and the 10th step?
Well, the fourth step is where you really go in there. The 10th step is where you review on a daily basis. So there are schools of thought. I certainly did in the early years, was I'd take what I call a mini step forward around a certain issue or around what was going on in the day. Because again, the more of these patterns we can see and possibly alleviate, the better. So the 4 steps, the book, and the 10th step is the editing and the bits and pieces and watching those patterns. As I've suggested, that if you repeat yourself, your ideal sexual infantry regularly, your life will run more smoothly. That's a guarantee. If it doesn't work, I'll give you your money back. Because the power of that sexual stuff has an ability to pull us off track. I know that's never happened to any of you guys. So before you go and read deeply, 10 step, you just keep an eye on it. As I said, you know. Then you step 4, that's fine. The way we suggest you work steps is you go back to step 1. A lot of people go back to step 4. I find it useful to do the other 3 steps first. Or more than useful. That's how I sponsor, that's how I share my experience. Because why are the other 3 there? And it helps prepare you for a good step 4. The truth will set you free. When we done that thing at school with my son, I reckon we were the only ones walked away free. Teachers had opinions, the other parents had opinions, the other kids had opinions. We were laughing and joking going down the street. It's not complicated or difficult if you take this a piece at a time. Maybe it's difficult. And again, like I suggested, you know, step 4 is the problem, step 5 is the solution. But stay out of your step 5, you know.
Just a question.
Okay.
I know that I was doing my step 4. I found I had a huge amount of resentments and anger with myself, probably more so than anybody else really. How do you do that in the resentment inventory? It's the best way to look at that.
That's a really good point. I think this is so for many of us. You know, I was angry with the way I negotiated my life. You know, you put yourself through the infantry. Right? Everything in this program is simple. You know, keep it simple. You know, the way I treated myself, I wouldn't have treated anyone else really. I wouldn't have. I was going to use the expression "treat a dog like that," but I wouldn't. I wouldn't dream of treating an animal in a bad way. But the way we treat ourselves is appalling. If you treat your best friend like that, they wouldn't be your best friend, would they? Yeah, and this is really not uncommon. You know, I hated myself. I was, strangely enough, I sent an email to my sponsor this morning, and because we're to share the mark, but you know, we've been on the road a long time together, you know, and I was sharing how good it was, and you know, how dear it was, and how well my life is. Right. It's not that difficult. I think more difficult than ever right now. But I'm in such a good frame of mind. You know, so someone I found very useful was Louise Hay, and I was given Louise Hay CD. In fact, it wasn't a CD; it was a cassette. That's how long ago it was, about self-loving and how to forgive myself and be kinder. This is really not uncommon. This, you know, I'm really glad you brought up that point. You know, we give ourselves one hell of a hard time, and it's usually to do with self-hatred. That may well come up in the fourth step. Another point worth pointing out here is the unmanageability in the first step is predominantly caused by the issues stuff in the fourth step. So what I'm saying here is our acting out right now and how we live right now is usually to do with the stuff that's coming up in the infantry. As we move through the steps, I'll suggest more, especially in the seventh step, ways of negotiating some of this self-hatred, low self-esteem, stuff that is usually all the time I've been doing this. Self-hatred, fear, low self-worth are the common culprits. And if you stick with this, and you do thorough work, you'll know what you got to work with it. It's not an expression I'm particularly fond of. But how are you going to fix it if you don't know what's wrong? It's pretty much at the bottom. It's not completely at the bottom of every work I've done with others on myself. Low self-worth, hatred, fear. For me, to a lesser extent, the sexual stuff. Not that it hasn't drove me up the wall at times.
Okay, we're coming to the end of our session. James, is there anything that you'd like to add before we close the meeting?
To the own self be true. Be true. I nearly said to the own self be true. I took drink, drugs, got involved in all kinds of things to gain freedom. That's what it was all about. Still is about for me. It's only about freedom. This is where a large amount of that freedom can be found. You know, I wanted to be kind of some crazy free spirit guy. Maybe I'll take some of that. You know. It's a good step. It's worth giving it a better shot.
Cool. Thank you so much, James. We're going to stop the recording now.